Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It is Tuesday, March 26, 2024. This is a school board workshop, and the time is 12 p.m. At this point, we have 3 items on the agenda: mid-year operational outcomes, fiscal year 2025 budget update, and agenda review for the March 26, 2024 regular agenda. Per board protocol, each member should strive for 4 minutes for initial comment, 2 minutes for follow-up, for a total of 10 minutes total. At this time, we're going to move into agenda item number 1. Are we ready for item 1, or do we need a moment?
We can go.
Okay. Item number 1 will begin with mid-year operational outcomes with Mr. Stevens, Mr. Alton, and Dr. Desimores, who will be facilitating this discussion. Welcome, everyone. And if you want to start us off, Mr. Superintendent.
Be happy to. Thank you, Dr. Desimore and Mr. Alton, for joining us. Mr. Stevens was currently in the conference room. I'm sure he's on his way over. This is part of a strategic plan update. This is about a continuance of making sure that while the core business of our business is always about academic and student achievement, there's other aspects that you've outlined within your strategic plan that you expect to be updated regularly on, and this is part of that process. So I will turn it over to the 2 amazingly qualified individuals who are sitting at the podium at the moment, and let them take you through their presentation.
Good afternoon, Dr. Bernier and members of the board. We are here to present, as Dr. Bernier said, the strategic plan update, specifically related to mid-year operational outcomes. In the strategic plan, we have, of course, our strategic priority of improving internal operating systems. And today, our focus is going to be talking about specifically the KPI 13.1, which was our goal to increase the number of defined impact measures to improve cost effectiveness of services and the value for expended funds. So, i.e., what data are we examining as the operating part of the school district in determining how efficient we are, where we might be doing well, and where we might need to improve. And so we'll go into a little bit of detail, starting with Mr. Stevens.
Good afternoon, members of the board, Dr. Bernier and Attorney DePride Bruner. Are you running it?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Our planning and construction departments share the responsibility of overseeing the construction of new schools to effectively accommodate the growth in student population by creating new student seats. To provide a clear picture, I'd like to present the enrollment numbers from the past 5 years alongside the corresponding student seat creation data over the same period. Next. Excuse me. This slide presents 3 tables demonstrating how operations in the capital plan have expanded the number of student seats to effectively respond to the evolving growth in our K-12 student population. The first table on the left displays the total K-12 student population figures over the past 5 years, sourced from Cycle 5 data reported to the state, alongside the number of available student seats in the school district. This comparison is crucial, as indicated by the added cents table, which underscores the growth of the school district and the corresponding increase in student seats during the same period. Notably, the annual growth rates during this time show a 0.84% increase in students and a 3.919% increase in new student seats. Next. Enrollment in student seat construction is indicated on this slide, and this graph illustrates the relationship between the student population and the total number of available student seats. It's evident that there has been a consistent increase in the student population over time, excluding the COVID year, corresponding with the growth in student seats. The increase in student seats district-wide has outpaced the increase in the student population. This is due to trying to stay ahead of the student growth and specifically addressing the growth in the East Zone. Next. This slide, also an indication of enrollment in student seat construction numbers. This shows the same data as the slide on, as the one on slide 4, but for the East Zone. I want to repeat, this one shows the capacity of student seats for the East Zone. You can see the growth in students and student seats. This increase in student seats can be attributed to the opening of new schools such as Gateway High School, Lehigh Acres Middle, and the additional facilities at Lehigh Senior High School. Additionally, Montessori Elementary added an additional 984 student seats this past school year. Changing gears a bit just to speak to maintenance KPIs. This is a reflection of average number of days PeopleSoft service requests are open that are greater than 90 days. One of the many responsibilities of the maintenance department is to respond to maintenance-related service requests submitted by internal customers. These service requests range from urgent HVAC or plumbing repair needs to roofing or flooring replacements that take more planning. In addition to the work being completed, the closing of service requests also requires response from customers confirming work is complete, along with finalization of expenditures and paperwork related to the service request. The average number of days service requests are open for the past 6 years is shown here on slide 6. In fiscal year 2022-2023 has the highest average due to the largest number of service requests from Hurricane Ian. As the district's facilities continue to age and the district continues to grow in facilities, the maintenance departments will be implementing strategies to reduce this average. These include recruiting strategies to fill vacant positions, better use of technology in the field to improve efficiency, and increased preventive maintenance to reduce overall service requests that are entered. The Florida Department of Education annual maintenance operations reports provide information related to educational facilities planning, funding, maintenance, construction, and operations throughout Florida's education system. A key statistic that is measured statewide by this report is maintenance cost per gross square foot for each school district. This strategic measure indicates the maintenance department's effectiveness in managing overall cost to provide needed maintenance services. The goal is to keep maintenance costs per gross square foot will be below state average. As we keep costs down, we must also make sure we continue investing in our facilities to maximize the useful life of district facilities and their systems. Next. Excuse me. What I'd like to discuss now are the KPIs for the Transportation Department. It is the policy of the school board to provide transportation for those students whose distance from their school makes this service necessary within the limitations established by state law and the regulations of the state of Florida. The goal of transportation is to provide this service in the safest and most efficient manner. Two key performance indicators or KPIs that are tracked within the Transportation Department are the on-time percentage of buses to and from school in the morning and the afternoon, and the number of preventable accidents involving the bus fleet. The KPI pertaining to on-time percentage states the Transportation Department will increase the on-time percentage of buses by 3% from 88% to 91% in the morning and from 71% to 74% in the afternoon. The KPI goal pertaining to preventable accident states the Transportation Department will decrease the percentage of preventable accidents by 3% from 41% to 38%. The table that you see now represents the on-time percentages over the past 3 years as reported quarterly for the morning and afternoon routes. The data is pulled from the GPS system being utilized on the buses. The one variable that has the greatest impact in the on-time percentage of buses to and from school is the number of drivers as compared to the number of routes needed to get the students to and from school in a timely manner. The School District of Lee County continues to deal with a shortage of bus drivers. The Transportation Department was budgeted 600 bus driver positions for the 2023-2024 school year. It started the school year, though, with 543 drivers of those 600 budgeted drivers. Currently, the district has 519 positions filled, leaving 81 routes open daily. The Transportation Department also has an additional 22 drivers who are unavailable to drive because they're on leave of absence, and that number is 10. Family Medical Leave Act, the number equates to 7. And those that are on workers' compensation, we have 4. Or there are individuals or an individual who is under investigation with professional standards also. Again, that is number 1. Transportation also averages, in addition to those absences due to the former information that I provided, we average over 40 drivers calling out daily. 40 drivers call out on a daily basis. This results in having to provide coverage for over 140 routes per day. And each route is responsible for at least 2 schools in the morning and 2 schools in the afternoon, which doubles the number of impacted buses. And just to give you a point of reference, the School District of Lee County Transportation Department runs approximately 548 buses per day, and we run 2,452 daily routes. This table represents the number of total accidents as compared to the number of preventable accidents. The National Safety Council's definition of a preventable accident is an accident in which the driver failed to do everything reasonable to prevent the accident from occurring. In addition, in accordance with the driver's safe driver plan, the Accident Review Committee reviews accidents to determine which accidents are deemed preventable and which accidents are considered non-preventable. Just again, currently there are 22 accidents that are scheduled for the Accident Review Committee, which will determine if the accidents are preventable or non-preventable. And just to give you a frame of reference, most of the accidents that occur are outside of individuals who are not driving buses, occur when drivers of buses sometimes hit objects such as fences, mailboxes, basketball hoops, awnings of bus ramps, etc. Thank you.
In the business services area, of course, our jobs are many and varied, but there are several impact measures that we wanted to highlight today as far as some of the things that we monitor to measure our effectiveness. One would be the school meals per labor hour, and that really represents, it's a measure of productivity and whether we are being efficient and how we can produce our school meals. The industry standard for that is 14 to 18 meals per labor hour. Our participation rates is an indicator to determine the type of labor that we need in order to support our student engagement every day in meals, and then also a gauge for customer satisfaction as well. Are kids enjoying the meals that we are providing for them? The benchmarks for that are 65 to 75% depending on the level, and we will get into a little bit of information about that. And then, and those two indicators or impact measures are an impact measure on, related directly to our students. So some information that we want to ensure that we monitor on a very consistent basis. And then another impact measure that impacts our vendors or some of our customers that we work with every day in terms of helping to provide all goods and services across the district, we measure our invoice processing time. It's an indicator of our adherence to statute or the Prompt Payment Act, and also a gauge for our vendor satisfaction. Are we fulfilling our duty to ensure that we pay timely for the goods and services that we receive. So those are the impact measures that we wanted to focus on today for for business services. So a couple of graphs that you have here in front of you. The first one on the left is the breakfast participation percentages. And this is the first half of the school year in each of the years that you're seeing. We had the information for FY24 for the first half of the school year, so we just wanted to compare the same time period in the previous 2 years that you see. The very orange is our elementary level. The middle is our yellow bar, and then the high being the blue bar in each of the graphs that you're going to see. So you'll see also a line that goes across the graph as well. That green line that goes across the graph here is the benchmark for the elementary and the middle level. So that benchmark participation at elementary and middle for breakfast is 35%. The benchmark for high school, as you see in this blue line that goes across the graph, is 25%. So you'll see that we are meeting the benchmark at the elementary level as far as breakfast participation. At the secondary level, not necessarily meeting the benchmark. And so we are always working to find out the reasons why for that. Some of it may be due to time frame. Some of it may be due to how students may feel on particular days about particular selections. And one of the things that we do to find out that information is to survey our students to get information from them as to things that they like, things that they want to see improved, and some things that they may want to communicate as far as breakfast and lunch is concerned. But we're always working to meet that benchmark. And then your graph that you'll see on the right is the lunch participation numbers. As you can see, those participation numbers are much higher, as we would expect them to be. And then the same setup of the graph of our levels, elementary, middle, and high, and then the benchmarks. At the elementary and middle, the benchmark is 75%, and at the high school, the benchmark is 65%. So of course, keep in mind too that some of this time frame had to deal with a COVID time frame where we were feeding a little bit differently, and so that impacts some of the numbers. But you see where the numbers are in 22, 23, and 24. So in 22, that was partly our COVID timeline where you saw participation really did spike up because we were feeding and delivering a lot of meals in that grab and go method at that point in time. The participation did drop somewhat in FY23, and I think related to that switch in the parameters and then kind of going back to a regular in-person type deal. And then in 24, you see the participation numbers back up as we're kind of trying to get back into the real swing of things. So generally at the elementary and middle level, we are meeting participation marks, but at the high school level, no. And so we continue to work on the reasons why and making sure that we're reaching every student all the time. As you all know, we are CEP district, so that means every meal at no additional cost to any student on any day, breakfast and lunch. And so we anticipate, or we expect, for our participation numbers to be very high. And we continue to try to make sure that they are, and then also to determine why they may not be, or why it may not be as expected in certain circumstances, and that survey is the major mechanism that we have to do that as far as student feedback. And then the meals per labor hour, again, for the first half of each school year, and the setup is the same for each level, elementary, middle, and high. That green bar being the benchmark, and as I took the higher part of the benchmark because the benchmark was 14 to 18 meals, and so I took kind of the mid of that at 16, so you'll see that go across the board. Generally, we meet the benchmark at elementary and middle, and even at high. For this particular year, we do meet the benchmark because it is at 15, and that range, so it's within the range, but we are always looking to make sure that we are refining that number, because inside of our food service funds, which is a self-supporting program, so we want for it to at least break even and make sure that we are efficiently using our funds. Labor and food, but labor is the biggest expense that we have inside of that fund. So we want to make sure that we're using our labor as efficiently as possible. So those are the benchmarks and the data for each of the past 3 years, the first half of the school year. And then invoice processing time is regulated by Florida Statute 218.735 and 74, commonly referred to as the Prompt Payment Act. And there are different standards for construction invoices and then non-construction invoices. You will see here the average pay time in days that we have for the past 3 years. FY22 and 23 are the full years, and then FY24, that is to date. So that would have been as of the information that we had as of last week. The Prompt Payment Act, or for those non-construction invoices, dictate that we must pay our invoices within a 35-day time period of receiving the invoice. And so we are meeting that benchmark on our average pay time across. So of course there are, and the average is just at the average, so there are some things that are over, some things that are other, but on average we are meeting our benchmark there. I do not have this broken out here as to what types of invoices they are, construction versus non-construction. So these are all invoices within that time period, everything that we paid. But there are 2 different statutes that govern that processing time. We pay attention to this because it's important for us, first of all, not to have any services cut off for us, any goods or services, but then second of all, because we want to make sure that we're helping the district maintain a good relationship with all the vendors that we work with and deal with on a daily, monthly, and annual basis. And with the amount, being a large utilizer of goods and services across the state and locally, we want to make sure that we are helping all of our employees across the district maintain good relationships with all vendors. So this is an important impact measure for us.
All right, so let's talk about our IT operations for just a minute. As you can imagine, in our world, we measure a lot of things. So what you have before you today is kind of a sample of how we manage performance, how we monitor it. And of course, you'll see some changes that we're going to be undertaking over the next couple of years as it relates to our performance management. So when you think of performance management in IT, obviously one of the first things people think about is how reliable are the systems. So we do monitor all of our core systems for reliability, and of course everyone likes to say, hey, we're at 99.9% reliability. We're actually beyond that, and we want to go further beyond that, and we are working on improvement strategies for a number of our systems to try to get to that second 9. But the other thing that people obviously think about when it comes to IT is technical support performance. How quickly can we get your problem resolved? Okay, so we're going to take a little bit deeper dive into that in just a second. But one of the things I think that probably is a behind the scenes thing that a lot of people aren't exposed to is when you manage enterprise software, for example, our enterprise resource planning systems, student information systems, those very large solutions, we're constantly iterating on the features along with the vendor, but we're also constantly iterating on the features and the functionality of that software to continue to provide additional value to the organization, as well as to accommodate changes in our district operating procedures. So while we won't take a deep dive into what that looks like, what I want to share with you is we are providing for all of our enterprise software, we have developed and we have implemented service level agreements that define how we respond to requests when different areas of our organization say we need different features, how we govern that, how we, what the expected response time is, what the commitment is from our staff and from the business process owners, and we do measure against that as well. But to share with you on the next slide some technical support KPIs, and again, this is a small number of the ones we manage. We actually, when it comes to response time, or what we call time to resolution, we're actually monitoring 22 different work streams for that, and we have goals for each one of those 22. But the 3 that you see here today are the ones that most people interact with: help desk, response time, field support, or if you're in a school, sending the Chromebooks in for shop repair. But again, this is just a small sample of the 22. As you can see, our trends are continuing to improve year over year, and what the blue represents is what we expect our performance to be at for FY25, for next school year. Right now, when you see the yellow 24, that's where we are so far in this school year, from July 1st up into this school year, and then 23. Now, we normalize this data a little bit because when we look at the trends, obviously we have to try to filter out things like a period of time directly after a hurricane. It makes it difficult to compare year over year. So what we've done is we have sampled the data during what we would call semi-normal times so that we can compare year over year. We're also making some adjustments for work schedules. So when we say that it took 2 days for something to be resolved, that's 2 work days versus, so we do massage this so that when we compare, we can compare apples to apples year over year. Now, the 3 that you see here, while it's a small sample, is representative of the trends in all 22 areas, which are all seeing similar improvement. And a lot of this is due to continuous procedural improvement. Some of it's due to better tools that we have, and some of it is related to training programs, which I'll show you in a moment. And as we move into the 25 school year, one of the things I wanted to point out is currently we measure district level IT performance. We're going to be in the new school year measuring in-school support performance as well. And the reason that's important to us is because for the majority of our customer group, their support experience starts in the school, that those issues might be escalated to us, but the majority of things that they see on a daily basis will happen within the school with their school tech support person. So we want to capture that so that we can establish a baseline for what that experience should be for the end user that is not interacting with my team directly, but interacting with the person within their school. The other piece that we'll be rolling out in 25 is a new customer satisfaction system. So we started by linking this to the closure messages for all of our tickets. We noticed people got desensitized to that. So we are developing a new way of sampling our tickets and reaching out to people, including where in this building, where it's not the schools because of the disruption, but in this building, if we're not getting a high level of responses, we're going to start doing call outs, individual calls from our department to customers to get some of that feedback. And then we're going to establish some baselines next year, both at the school level and the district level for satisfaction. And in those measures, we are measuring the professionalism of staff, did they take ownership of the process, was communication sufficient, those kinds of things. So we're targeting things that are within that person's control, and then we're going to establish those dashboards next year as well. Now, the other area that we've been focused, we obviously tackle most of our performance challenges from multiple directions. One big one that's been a challenge, two things. One is we've had a lot of turnover in the last few years. So if you're at the school level, we're talking about 60% of our school tech people have turned over in the last 3 years. That doesn't include the ones that have moved from one position to another, but actually, new people in those positions. So the challenges we've had with recruiting, which you're familiar with, a lot of our applicants are not coming in with a lot of experience or credentials. So we are working now, we've been working this year, and we're going to continue the program where we are going to be ramping up the training programs for both at the school level and for our staff here. So at the school level, all new tech people are assigned a mentor that works with them directly, checks in on them regularly. And regardless of what credentials they come in with, our goal is that after they've been in the organization 2 years, they're going to have 4 recognized credentials that we've selected that are most relevant to improving performance within their area. The other reason this is so important, aside from the tech people at the school level being the first line of defense, but they're actually, the tech program is a feeder program for us to recruit into our help desk and field tech roles. So the better prepared we can have those people at the school level, and the better prepared we can have them coming into the district level positions, we see that improving our performance. So that is one of our big goals for the next 2 years, is to ramp that up. Now, the district level tech support performance and in training, we have now gone to a model where I'd say about 2/3 of my staff at this point have built-in training time into their work week. So the goal is that the majority of them have 4 hours a week for training to continuously develop their skills and to help them prepare for the next evolution. And these are either vendor-specific training for the products we use, or their industry recognized programs that help prepare them. So as you can see, ramping up, this is going to be a pretty good lift, because only about 40% of our people coming in have credentials of any kind. That could be a college degree that's related, that could be a certification program, but our goal is to bring that up to where entry level is 4 within 2 years, and they're all current programs and industry recognized programs. So those are some of the measures we wanted to share with you today. We obviously have a lot more we can share if you're interested. So.
Thank you. So we'll turn the discussion over to the superintendent for comments and any board discussion.
So thank you first to the team who presented, 3 very excellent chiefs who are trying to stay on top of lots of information, and at the same time trying to create metrics and measures. So we are interested in your feedback today in a discussion regarding some of these metrics and measures, as well as some engagement with staff related to not only what you've seen in their presentation, but what you might like to see as other key performance indicators for us to consider. So I'll turn it over to the board, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Board members, comments, questions? Ms. Langford Fleming, followed by Mr. Persons.
Thank you. Since it's top of mind, and thank you for going through this, I'm sure this whole thing is a heavy lift, quite frankly, but since it's top of mind and we just spoke about it on slide 16, Mr. Alton, can we start this recruiting? I mean, I learned so much through my own kids regarding technology. They're so much faster at all of that than I am. Is this something that we can start to maybe implement in a safe way, growing our own and having students in high schools sort of team up or get mentoring? But I obviously would need to do it in a safe way, because they'd be, looking at secure data. But is that something that we've tackled?
Yeah, absolutely. So we currently have internship programs. Now, some of them high school students can qualify for. Of course, we're working with them outside of their school time. Others, it's typically college students, because they're over 18 and have a little bit more flexibility. So the challenge we've run into with some of our internship programs is we have some local business partners that are very good business partners, and offer them more money. So, however, I will tell you this: we have, of the people in the organization right now, both at the school level and at the district level, we have over 30 that started in one of our internship programs. So we do start recruiting them out of our schools. We also are tech colleges, and then we also work with some of the local universities. Now, some of those obviously go on to other organizations, and we wish them well. They've got they got great experience here. They get a letter of recommendation. If they're successful in the program, they move on. We are expanding as well. Right now, we have a program, because one of the most difficult areas is software engineering. Okay, and we have a program for that is a paid internship program where they work for a year here. And that's been very successful as well. We've brought that in. So we're looking to expand those opportunities to summer programs for our high school students, because the summer, the other thing we run into with some of our internship programs is that they want to get paid. So unpaid internships are not as popular with the students, obviously. So we're applying for another grant with the state, which is how we started the one we use for our software engineer. So we recruit from several different avenues, and we unfortunately just can't keep a hold of the Dunbar High School kids that come out of the Technology Academy out of there. They do tend to get hired pretty quickly. So we're using a lot of different avenues.
Thank you.
On the meals per labor unit, is that mostly a staffing issue, or some years are working faster and some years are working slower? I mean, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So if they're doing more units, more meals per unit, is that, I assume that's per person?
Yes, it is per person or per labor hour, right? So on average, the people, so it's a function of a couple of things, of the number of people and the number of meals that are being served, right? And so it could mean a couple of things. So that number is, you want that number to be efficient, because you want to make sure that you are not providing too much labor for the demand that you have at a particular location. Then you also want to make sure that you're getting as much production as, as the benchmark says you should be out of each, individual for each hour. And so if the demand is down, or if something happens at a school, if a school grows, then, its staffing may need to grow. If if that meals per labor hour number creeps up too much, then, we might be asking people to do more than what they kind of should be doing, or what is the average to produce. If it's lower than that, it could mean that, maybe the number of meals that's at the location doesn't necessarily call for the amount of labor there is. So there could be a call that need to shift some things around, or maybe let attrition handle some things, that type. So it really is about those two different things.
Right.
in that ratio.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Ms. Patrica?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation and the information. I appreciate it. Could we go to slide 6, please? So I'm not really clear what this slide is telling me. I think you said average number of days PeopleSoft service requests are open greater than 90 days. I think that's what you said, but it's printed less than 90 days. So I'm wondering if 2018-19, is that 78.99 days above 90? Or is that the number of days that we had those service requests open in total?
It's basically, Ms. Patrica, the number of days that the requests are open. And as I indicated, it's not necessarily because the job has not been completed or the task has been completed. It requires the customer to indicate it has been completed and close it as well.
Okay, so these aren't really even accurate numbers.
They're accurate numbers, but based on the data that's provided by the system. But if you dig down, they would probably, we actually probably need to restructure, or maybe speak to, and we are discussing this, revising how these numbers are reported, so that we can have more efficient data, not efficient data, but workflows and also closures, so that something is not sitting out there waiting for a customer to close it or say the work has been completed, but the trade person or a staff member can close it based upon completion of the work.
That does seem to make a little bit more sense. Slide 9. Who is on the accident review committee, please? I mean, I don't need names, just like, do we have police officers that are on there? Do we have, who does that?
No, we have union representation. You have to go.
Mr. Stevens, Mr. Chair, if I may. Mr. Stevens, do you want Mr. Lloyd to answer that question?
I would, yes, if it's okay with the board.
Yeah, please proceed.
Thanks. The Accident Review Committee is made up of a union representation, a safety supervisor, a shop supervisor, and the driver as well. So they come together, they look at the accident report, and really the determination is made between whether it was a preventable or non-preventable accident.
Okay. Thank you. Slide 13.
Yes.
So this is kind of a tough question. If the average is 34 and the law requires 35, we probably have a lot above 35, bringing the average, right? Like, so how, it seems like we're not following, you said the law was 35. If we have an average of 34, it seems like we're not following the law on a lot of occasions. Would that be a fair assessment?
Well, there are some invoices that get paid that are over 35 days and some that are much less than 35 days. So as I said, yes, the average. So yes, that would be a fair assumption to say that not every invoice that comes across the table gets paid in the 35 days. And so, yes, that is a fair statement. And we do look at those instances to analyze to find out what was the issue or the problem. So it says within 30, there could be something that gets paid more than 35 days, but there was a problem resolution with it, right? And so that's not necessarily against statute, because that is, okay, once you get an invoice that everyone agrees upon, basically. So there could be a problem resolution that has to happen with a particular invoice, or maybe not. But anything that is above 35 days, yes, we work to make sure that we are in compliance every single time. But does it happen every single time? Not necessarily.
So can I assume that we're looking at trends to try to figure out where the issues are? Number one. Number two, what are the consequences for being in violation of statute?
So that, to my knowledge, the statute doesn't lay out any particular consequence.
Okay.
But yes, we do look at our trends to determine, okay, where do we have a particular issue, and is there something that we can do to resolve the issue faster if it was something within our control? So, yes.
All right, great. And then my final question, if I may, Mr. Chair, is slide 16. How do we keep them once we train them?
Well, I would like to say that we always do, but we do have, well, in the past, qualify that, in the past 6 months or so, we've seen the retention better. Market conditions are obviously a challenge.
Yep.
We do understand that we will have a portion of those staff that move on for various reasons. Compensation is not always the one. But we've, you know, retention is a challenge that I'd like to say that we have tackled, but unfortunately, while we're seeing improvements, we're not to where we were years ago, where people were with the organization for a longer period of time. And there are a number of factors. I mean, not just the comp system, but also, you know, the number of opportunities for advancement. It's when people typically retire or move on. So we are working on that, and we do monitor that. And we do our own exit interviews with school tech people, even aside from what HR would do. So if somebody lets us know they're leaving, we try to find out, you know, the reason, and just for our own information so that we can improve.
Well, I think that your department, more than others, is, you have really the hardest road to travel when it comes to keeping employees, because they make so much more outside the district, and the level of technical knowledge is so specific to do what they do in your department. And I remember my very first tour of Cape Coral Tech, it was, the students will get to this stage and then they leave the program because they're being hired out at such high rates of pay, and we can't compete with that. So part of me wonders whether all of this credentialing is a good use of money, because so many of those people are gonna move on from here, but at the same time, we need the credentials because we need the people to be able to do the work. So it's kind of,
Yeah, it is.
I don't know the answer, but I'm, you know.
And
it's a
we've,
problem.
you know, we look at, and it's like anything, right? Everything is how does it net out? Does it net a positive versus negative? And we believe it does net a positive. But the other thing that we have done is we have built internal capacity. We've also utilized online training programs to push the average cost to train somebody way down. So if you looked at us, say, when we used to have a program called the Grow Your Own program. When we compare to those programs, we're at probably 20% of the cost we were at before to train them. We also have brought in the assistance of some of our vendors to provide the training. As large customers, we often have the benefit of being able to partner with our vendors for some of those things. So at the end of the day, we still see that we're netting significant positive. But we do run that risk of somebody taking credentials and moving on to another organization.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Miss, were you up? I think Miss Jordan was next, and Miss
Yes,
Juvenile.
please.
Sorry, just one.
Thank you. Mr. Stevens, my first question was, you had, I just want for clarification, please, 31 could not drive because of different reasons. Is that 31 drivers part of the 519 that we have at this time, or is that 31 less than the 519 that we have at this time?
Sorry, I believe, Ms. Jordan, the number was 41. Let's see. But no, it is not part of the number that does not, the 519. We have 519 positions that are currently filled, and of those 519, we have the 22 drivers who are unavailable.
So it's that, so we have them, but we don't have them then?
Correct,
Okay,
yes.
I just wanted that, to clarify that in my own.
In addition to that, as I noted, there are also 40 drivers on average who call out on a daily basis.
Right, I wrote that down, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that clarification. And then, Dr. Desamore, I know Mr. Persons just had asked about the meals, and when I was looking at that, that just blew my mind, 14 to 18 meals per hour. It's like, seriously? You cannot make more than that? Is that serving, actually making the meals and serving it, or is it preparing the food in the kitchen? What is that 14 to 18 per person for the meals in
No,
an
it's,
hour?
it's not in the service, it's in the preparation itself. So the preparation of, the number of hours in the kitchen and the number of meals to be produced in a day. So it's not about the service, it's about the preparation itself.
So they're looking at, okay, so 18 meals multiplied by the numbers of students is what the meal should equate to, divided by the hours.
Right.
Okay, that's why I was trying to get all that. And then when I'm looking at the slide 11 with the school, the high school, because we see that a lot of those students are not.
Did you say
eating.
11? Yes.
I'm sorry,
uh-huh.
11.
Yes.
Thank you. So a lot of those students are not eating either breakfast nor lunch. So how is that calculated as far as, does that include a la carte? There, if they're purchasing a la carte items at the high school level?
No, this particular graph does not include à la carte. It's specifically about the lunch, if the lunch was served on that day or not.
Okay.
À la carte would be a different number, and we do keep the information on à la carte, but it would not be included in this percentage.
Okay, so then in saying that, when they're preparing the lunches for the high schools, they're looking at the population, and then that's the number of meals that they're making. So what is the waste factor on that?
Well, I think in addition to that, in addition to the population, but we're also looking at the history, the daily meals that are being served as well.
Okay.
Right? So it's not necessarily looking at, okay, well, if this is a 2,000 or 2,500 student high school, that's the number of meals that we're going to serve. There's information on how many meals are really served each individual week or each individual day, also which meals may be more popular on any given day than another meal, and all that is taken into account when determining how and when to order food and how much food to order and how many meals to prepare on a given day.
Okay, so they just based by the history.
Right,
Thank you.
right.
Mr. Chair, can I make a correction of something I said for Ms. Jordan? Ms. Jordan, I believe you stated there were 21 drivers, and I should have said there were 22. I may have said 41 inadvertently. I just wanted to make sure I provided the correct information that were unavailable. Thank you.
May I, but I appreciate the question, though, in terms of if we want to add some additional information here or keep some additional benchmarks on how the à la carte sales are doing and by level where they are. I think that would be an important piece of information to kind of add to this to see, what level of participation period in terms of eating in a given day we may have. À la cartes suffered last year because of our difficulty to be able to get the food from our vendors that we were using in the appropriate amount of. We had a lot of conversation about that at this level. But this year, based on the new relationships that we have with our new vendors, our à la carte sales are bouncing back. And so that's a factor this year that we struggled a little bit with last year.
Thank you, because that would be good to know, because when you're looking at this, you're like, why are these kids not eating?
Yes.
You know that they're eating something.
Yes.
Hopefully.
Yes,
So
yes.
thank you for that.
Yes, that very good point. It is taken. And we are, you see that the benchmarks for high school do tend to be lower, for various reasons. But we want to, try to ensure that we are hitting that. And so I think that that's a true statement that à la carte sales are going to add kind of a different picture on that.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And then, Mr. Dalton, I want to thank you, because I know that with the internships, I was taking a ride that one day, getting it Ubered back, and one of the students from FGCU actually contacted them for a position there.
Yeah,
So
Ms.
thank
Jordan
you
is
for
one of
that.
our recruiters. so.
So I just want to thank you.
It takes a village.
Is that it, Ms. Jordan? Okay. Ms. Juvenile?
And I just wanted to thank Jada, because she actually asked the question that I was curious about, internship. But can we, and Ashley and Ms. Patrica as well, because I wanted to piggyback off of what she had said. Is there any way that we could entice or incentivize keeping our students here for a period of time before we do lose them to the real world? With teaching them, getting the credentialing, and then ask them to commit for a certain period of time. I mean, there's something that we could do to, like I said, incentivize to keep them here longer, that we know we have them for a period of time, and then we know we possibly could lose them to, like I said, the real world. But is there any way to incentivize that and contractually?
So I'd have to really run that by HR and legal, but I know in other organizations there are commitment requirements. Now, of course, what happens if they do not meet that commitment is what would enforcement look like is always the question, right? So I think some of the incentives we can, as we are able to fund more paid internships because right now we have both, paid and unpaid internships. I think that provides a little bit of an incentive. But I will say that our internship rates, and we're not able to compete with like Chico's and some of the others that in the community that do tend to recruit our students. So we could definitely take a look at that, though.
Thank you. That's all. Thank you. Great.
Thank you. We're next. Ms. Patrica?
All right, just super quickly, you talk about incentivizing. I know the Sheriff's Department does buybacks, so we talk about 40 drivers calling in every day. If we had personal time buybacks, that might decrease the number of people who are calling in on any given day at any level of the organization. I know that's probably a union issue and a budget issue and all of that, but isn't it cheaper to have drivers getting kids to school on time? I mean, it might be more expensive from a money perspective, but if we have kids at school on time, then we're fulfilling our mission, right? Am I making sense? That's it.
Yes.
That's just all I wanted to say.
Ms. Morgan?
Mr. Alton, thank you. You've given a lot of information about what you're trying to do with respect to your staffing. I do have one question. Can we cover credentialing costs if someone leaves shortly after they've been credentialed?
We have no contractual language in place at this point, so that would be something we would have to look at. So obviously a discussion with, and because also entry-level positions are in the bargaining unit, so we would have to HR, legal, and potentially SPALC involved in those discussions. But it is something we can pursue. I think also one of the things, though, that we do struggle with is for a lot of the applicants, there is the expectation that you're providing educational benefits, which we don't provide exactly what, for example, the county agencies provide, right, which is tuition reimbursement, that kind of thing. So I think that it does help us compete with some of those other agencies that provide it as part of their compensation package. So it could, I'm not really sure how we would predict, where we would net out with that, but it's something we could pursue.
I want to thank my colleagues for asking all the questions that I had written down, so that's it. Oh, and I do have one question for Mr. Stevens. So 8%, you have an 8% average call-out rate. How does that compare to other bus transportation systems? Do you know, in other counties, what's the state?
Based on our discussions, Ms. Morgan, and with the Transportation Department, as well as information we've shared with the superintendent, this seems to be pretty much average. And as you know, nationally, there is a challenge to recruit drivers. We've also had conversations with the Boston Public School System, and Mr. Lloyd and his team, as well as myself, are always trying to find ways to recruit drivers and retain them, because recruitment is just half of the task. So we're trying to figure out how we can retain them as well. So it is a national trend, and beyond local, it's national. So what I've also tried to do, if I may, I've tried to engage with drivers and routers and transportation staff by visiting at least one compound per week to get their perspective as to what we can do to make the jobs better. Maybe not easier, but better, so because I need their perspective, because they're doing this job, which is a really tough job on a daily basis. And if there are challenges that we are not aware of, I try to find out from them with, personal conversations to help, so they can share with us what we can change. So we're diligently making an effort to reduce those numbers. We're in constant conversation regarding what are the reasons for the call-outs. Again, how we can pull those numbers back. We know that salary is an issue, but there's nothing I can do at this point because of the salary survey that's going on. But we're trying to make the job more accommodating to an extent and make it more comfortable. Because again, as I said, it's very challenging.
Thank you. And I just have a general...
Mike?
Oh, gosh. Thank you. Thank you so much. I have a general comment question. And it really doesn't pertain specifically to this group, but some of Mr. Alton's comments made me sort of go down this rabbit hole. When was the last time the Education Foundation and the school district had a conversation about what the needs of the district were and how the foundation could best support the school district? Because I know in many instances, well, I can't say in many, in some instances, education foundations provide financial support for things that educational institutions cannot. And I'm going to, because I'm going off the board, I can make this comment. I think the foundation is stuck in terms of the kinds of services and support it provides to the school district. It's a very traditional way. It continues to do the same old. And I think it, particularly given that it is sort of an ancillary business advisory group to the board, I think it's time to suggest that the board and the foundation engage in a conversation about how best to support the school district moving forward. Anyway, that's just a general comment. Thank you.
Yeah, if I can respond. Generally, those conversations go on all the time, but what I think you're asking is in a very formal way. Since I've been here, we have not. However, on April 26th, the foundation board strategic plan process is going to be underway. It'll be a set of retreats much like we had over ours. I will have a seat at that table, thinking about, buyback days for personal leave and other things, looking at how we can better support industry and micro-credentialing, borrowing from the work of some of the work we're doing with the collaboratory, after school care, before school care. Those will all be issues that I'm happy to do and bring forward. So I think I should add in our one-on-ones an opportunity for you to provide me some feedback as to what you'd like me to carry into that strategic plan session and sessions with the foundation.
A follow-up question of you, is that being facilitated by an outsider or is that an internal strategic planning process? Do you know?
It is being facilitated by someone who used to facilitate our strategic planning process. She is not directly associated with the foundation. She now works for county government. Offline, I can give you the actual name if you'd prefer. I just don't want to announce.
No, that's fine. Thank you. That answers the question. And those are my comments and questions. Thank you.
I was, Dr. B, I was about to say the same thing. Yeah, we have as I'm on the foundation board, I was about to mention the strategic planning. I'm happy to work together with Dr. Bernier as well to make sure our voices are heard and anything that you guys are interested in bringing forward to that board. So, before I go to my comments, was there anything else? Okay, then Mr. Persons.
One thing from Mr. Stevens, what is the current starting salary for bus drivers, and how do we compare now to our surrounding other districts, Collier and Charlotte?
I think that's the starting salary currently, Ms. Giovanelli, is $18.90 an hour. I have not myself compared that to the local districts, but I can certainly find out for you and get an answer to you immediately following this meeting, if that would be okay.
Mr. Persons?
On the busing transportation, I had just two quick questions. One, is there any incentive for the bus drivers for attendance? I mean, for showing up, like every 30 days that they work, they get a small bonus. Do we have anything like that? I know other districts have. I've talked to them at some of our conferences. And the other thing is, and this might be outside the box, when I've been there observing, when someone calls in, it's who can take this route. Have we ever thought about getting a pool of substitutes that are qualified, maybe former bus drivers that only want to drive occasionally, but to actually get a pool that you could call and maybe fill in?
So answers to both questions, sir. I think they're excellent questions. So I'll start with the last one, then we'll come back to, I'll start with the incentivization. Currently, we do not have an incentive program. We just don't. But we have been talking about how do you change an overtime culture into an on-time culture. And one of the ways we think we can do that is by incentivizing people, not on a yearly basis or a semester basis, but almost on a week-by-week basis. If you have perfect attendance for the week, then this happens. But that would have to be a negotiated item through the SPALC agreement. As to the other idea, that is always the goal. We talk about it often when I meet with transportation every 2 weeks. We talk about this pool of what I used to call radio relief drivers. When I was a school principal, if 2229 wasn't going to get into the loop because something happened, then a radio relief driver would arrive. They would know where they were going to run. That's kind of was their role in transportation. Certainly the goal in transportation is get back to a fully staffed group of people, and then also move beyond that so that we have those individuals as well. To Mr. Stevens and Mr. Lloyd's credit, they have investigated like A&S Transportation and other people. It comes down to a liability issue that we have to settle because when they move into a substitute role and start driving our buses, there becomes a need to settle with the company who's providing them, and then our liability insurance should something happen. So those ideas are under investigation, but they haven't come to full fruition yet. But the goal with middle school proximity is that should again lower the number of drivers that we need. Let me be clear to the bus drivers who are listening. Every bus driver still we're going to need to have a job. So we're not talking about any reduction in force. We need of all our bus drivers because we will be able to manage again smaller number of routes, less number of distance, and then potentially as we continue to hire, which was a pretty good scene today in our public entrance in the back of the building. I haven't seen a line like that since student enrollment. And for once, the line was about employees looking to become food service workers, bus drivers, and substitutes. And it was and we'll have numbers for you at tonight's board meeting. So both are excellent examples of what we think we should be working on. And I think some of what we've raised today in the executive session that comes up in preparation for bargaining, I think those issues should come up again as well. And if you don't bring them up, I've written them down.
If I may just add a thought to that, Dr. Bernier. We are also, Mr. Persons, paying for the licenses for drivers at this point, which is serves somewhat as an incentive.
Is that it, Mr. Persons? Thank you. Okay. I'm going to go ahead. I know we're limited on time, so maintenance, busing, and food, three of our favorite topics always within the district. So great job by all of you. A couple of quick things. Transportation, for example, slide 8 on-time percentages, and thank you, Dr. Bernier, for getting us information on arrival time performance. I appreciate that. I just want to make sure that we're continuing to, which I know there's obviously difficulties with all of it entirely, but making sure our high school morning arrival pickups are, that we're really focusing on that, because if something's off with that, we all know what happens obviously next throughout the rest of the day. So I know that's one of the issues that we continue to discuss.
Transportation does prioritize high school. If a high school driver calls in, we go up the tiers. We go into tier 2 and tier 3 and tier 4, our 2 elementary runs and our middle school run, and we bring every available driver forward to ensure that we get our high schools on time to get the best running start for our second and our third and fourth tiers. I have information that was sent to me probably yesterday. I saw it for the first time today, which is the arrival time performance spreadsheet that you have been seeing. It's a good update, and you'll get that in your inboxes following the meeting today. But it gives you a very good idea in that last tab of how we've been doing over the last several weeks. And I'm happy to report we're seeing more and more green in both morning for high school, elementary, and middle. Our percentages are also, for late buses, are dropping finally into generally the single digits, 8, 7, 9%. Still not perfect, but a lot better from where we started. And we do continue to hope that we get more hires today and that we continue to grow our bus driver population. It's really coming down to a number. And lastly, related to bus transportation, I think there's one more task force meeting with the Transportation Task Force, and we should be getting their recommendations regarding how we should begin to and then the Transportation Department will present to you in the spring.
Thank you, Dr. Bernier. Again, I guess Mr. Stevens and Dr. Bernier. Maintenance, I just want to make sure, and I know we've kind of had some of these discussions that said obviously, many of us hear about maintenance and stuff. I just want to make sure philosophically we're looking at it to make sure that, we're using maintenance to ensure that our buildings are lasting longer, or getting our bang for the buck out of the building. So I know that's something I want to make sure, so we're spending less capital dollars later on with them. So.
And if I can address that,
Yes.
Mr. Fisher, what I've done, I've met with my team recently, and I've advised them we need to start looking at the summer so we can make sure our facilities are in very good condition and making sure our equipment is functional and operable prior to the opening of the school year next year. So that's part of our plan.
I appreciate that. Next, Dr. Desamores, on real quick, just you talked about in regards to the meals, and you provided some of the data. Is there a way we could get some of the survey data for the satisfaction, if we're able to get that, or Dr. Bernier, if we're able to get that in the future, not now, but.
Yes,
Just to kind of
uh-huh.
see where we're at with stuff, because obviously we
Yes.
get a lot of feedback. I do as a parent. I just want to actually see what the real feedback is, so.
Yes, absolutely, we can do that. We haven't conducted it yet for this year, but we certainly can give you the feedback that we received.
Thank you. And I think, Mr. Alton, you're off the hook. I think everyone asked the question. So just want to thank the three of you for your hard work and really appreciate it. So anything else? Or are we good to move on? Okay, thank you, everyone. Next, we're going to move on to item 2, fiscal year 2025 budget update. Dr. Desamores and Ms. Lecter.
Oh, never mind. I'll stay.
Dr. Bernier, are you okay for us to start?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Hey, long time no see. So now we're here to talk about the FY25 budget update, giving all kinds of good information on FEFP, school allocations, and our timeline. As you all know, it was an early legislative cycle, so we have some updated information to share with you. I am going to turn it over to Mrs. Letcher.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I just wanted to start mainly for the general public to understand how the funding for the school district works. I know that you all know because you go through trainings and things, but the general public, I don't think, understands how that works. So basically, our students are counted a couple of times a year, and we receive what they call an unweighted FTE, which is a basic count of the kids and the hours that we serve them. They add weights onto those students, so that's based on the levels of service we're providing for the students. If they're a basic student, based on K to 3, 4 to 8, 9 to 12. We also have a weight for ESOL students, for different levels of ESE services, and then for career education. They're all provided a weight, and that they come up with another number then called the weighted FTE. The weighted FTE is then what we're funded on. They take that weighted FTE and they apply the formula of the weighted FTE times the base student allocation, or the BSA, and then times the comparable wage factor, which used to be the district cost differential. They have changed that, and that comes up with a base student amount of funding for the district. They then take different areas that the legislators have decided are areas that they want to have separate funding sources that are specific for that. That would be like your safe schools, your mental health, your class size, and they add those items in, and that is the gross funding for the district. They take that amount, then the gross funding, and they look at our tax roll. They come up with a required local effort millage that we are to levy, and that becomes the local portion that is then removed from that dollar amount. So you have the gross amount, then you have your local portion, that's subtracted, and then you have your funding from your state and from your local. They then take the discretionary local millage, which is the .748 that we are allowed to levy. They add that to that amount, and they come up with what they call the total potential amount for the district. So that's basically how it's done. So you'll see a bunch of numbers, and you'll hear different numbers from me. You'll see numbers from the state. But what the state usually does is takes that total potential, divides it by the unweighted FTE student, and they come up with what they call the per student amount that they have done for Lee County. For Lee County, the amount you've probably heard from the state is $9,182.21. So that differs from numbers you'll hear from me because they're calculated differently based on, whether they're family and scholarship students and things like that. So just want to kind of go over that, and then I want to dig into what happened during this legislative session and what the FEFP has done for us. So I'm going to start with the unweighted FTE. So that we do a projection, every year, and our unweighted projection was slightly above what the state actually came up with. The state had 107,550.54 as our unweighted FTE. That is a decrease of 92.25 from what our projection was. That is totally in the Family Empowerment Scholarship is where they reduced that number. We have that 107,000 represents an increase in our total unweighted FTE from the current year of 3,924.18. 2,246 of that is from the Family Empowerment Scholarship, and the district and charter increase is 1,677.43. There was an increase in the base student allocation of $191.25. It is this year at $5,330.98. And the comparable wage factor actually decreased a 0.0051. This year, it's 1.007 something, I think. And that will represent a $3.2 million impact on Lee County. Anytime that comparable wage factor decreases, it does have an effect on us. And it has been decreasing ever since they became the comparable wage factor. In our last discussion, I think it was Ms. Patrica asked if we could do a comparison of some point of our base student allocation from year to year. So I wanted to make sure that I provided that to you. As you can see, the base student allocation over the last 3 years has increased. Last year, however, in FY24, you'll see the large increase of 552. That was the year that they also put in the teacher salary increase allocation, the instructional materials, the reading categorical, and the teacher supply allocation into the base student allocation, which drove that number up. So, and then this year, the $191.25 increase is a true increase in the base student allocation. As you can see in the comparable wage factor, in 23 was the year that they made the change from the district cost differential to comparable wage factor, and since they've made that change, we've been declining ever since. So I want to go over the tax roll with you as well. As you know, that plays a large impact on our budget. It doesn't really with the required local effort, because like I said, with the required local effort, all they do is reduce that amount off of the total base amount, which then the state just pays more or less. But where it does have an effect on us is the discretionary millage and the capital outlay millage. Our tax roll, as you can see, is proposed at $151 billion. I will tell you that this will change in July when for the second FEFP, you'll see that number change. The tax collector will, they're doing their things to come up with an actual number right now. But as it stands right now, that will increase the amount that we're receiving for discretionary millage. So we'll see an additional $4.4 million from that as it stands right now. And the capital outlay millage will see about $8.8 million. This is an increase in our tax rate of 4.24%, which is not, it's actually going down in the percentage of increases over past years, but it's still a nice increase for us. So what does this all mean to us? So our total potential increase is at total potential is at $987 million. This is an increase of $58 million over the current third calculation. Of that $58 million, $17.5 million of that is strictly an increase for Family Empowerment Scholarship. So we will not see $17.5 million of that. $40.5 million of that does come to us for our district and charter schools. There was an increase in some categoricals, as you can see the different amounts, which make up a part of that as well. And then there was an increase in the state-funded discretionary supplement, which again is strictly for Family Empowerment Scholarship. We see none of those dollars. And I just wanted to add that on the teacher salary increase allocation, as you know, when they put it into the base student allocation last year, they do give you a required amount that you have to use for the teacher salary increase allocation. And this year it's at 1.07%, which would be about $6.8 million. So when we break that down even further for us, if you take the $58 million, you have $17.5 for the Family Empowerment Scholarship, Then it had like 40 million, I think was the other number. Then you break that down, 15.4 of that 40.5 million is strictly for the growth of the students for the charters and district schools. So that really leaves us about 25 million of new money to be able to take care of what we need to do with our new initiatives and to do some important things for us. So some of the challenges and the initiatives that we're looking at is we will see, we're believing we'll see an increase in our property insurance, not as great as we have seen in the past, but we're expecting about $2.3 million increase there. The Florida Retirement System, or the FRS, did go up a little bit, nothing like it has in the past. We estimate that to be about $325,000 more. We will have to increase the amount that we set aside in the budget for our health insurance because we're having higher participation than we had originally projected for our dependent care, which is a good thing. Some of the initiatives that we're really looking at wanting to do is providing salary increases for our employees. And we're looking at a new school allocation to drive more dollars to the schools to help our schools to be able to accomplish the things they would like to accomplish with the students. And one of the challenges we have, of course, is our loss of ESSER funding and trying to make some really tough decisions on things that were funded from there and what, if we're going to be able to continue with them, what we would give up in order to do that. So there's some tough decisions going to be made with that. So I want to talk to you a little bit about our new school allocations. So the big why are we changing the allocations? So we have been having some meetings with principals and received some feedback from them. Some of the things we've heard is that they would like to have more flexibility with the dollars that are provided to them. They would like dollars that are given to them based on the type and the levels of the students that they're serving. And they would like to have the funds for any additional requirements that are put on them. They would like to be able to have the funds that come to them to be able to help with those. And they would like all of their allocations at the same time. So while we give them their, what we currently call the district resource allocations, there's other allocations that go to schools, such as IDEA and Title I. And traditionally, those are provided after the fact, and they would like them all at the same time. So taking that information, we've looked at another way that we could allocate dollars and help our schools. So what we've come up with is that we're looking at, instead of just looking at the number of students that they have, is looking at the weighted FTE that's turned in for the schools, that they report the types of students they're serving, and basing their allocations on their weighted FTE. That makes it, the funding for the students, the way they're reported, will follow those students that way. So this is a big thing because the FTE is now the driver for their allocation. So it's going to be very important that that FTE is reported accurately. So the schools are working on that as well. We're looking at providing more flexibility to them. So we have requirements they will have to meet. They will have to meet class size. They will have to make sure that they're providing the services to their to students based on their IEPs. They will have certain requirements they have to do. The same requirements that are put onto the district will be onto them. They'll have to do those. But then the rest of their dollars will be flexible for them to make the decisions of how they best want to serve their students. The schools will receive all of their allocations at the same time. So when we go out with those allocations, along with their resource allocations, they'll have the Title I allocations at the same time. They'll have their IDEA at the same time. They'll know what food service staff will be at their school. They'll have all of that. That will help them to make the best decision, the most rounded decision for their students and their school. So we've been meeting with principals this week, and we will continue to meet with principals this week to go over this process, this new allocation formula, get their feedback, make sure that we aren't missing anything, because we've tried very hard to make sure that we are helping them and not hindering them. Just wanted to touch on that. So the last thing I want to talk to you about is our budget timeline. So where do we go from here? So we're looking at actually giving those schools their new allocations the first week in April. We are, at the same time, we are working on department budgets. We will start our reviews, the chiefs will start reviewing all of the budget requests that come in for departments in April. We will also be updating you all on different parts of the budget in April as well. The chiefs will make final decisions for the department budgets and present them to the superintendent in May. We'll have another update for you in May. And then in June, we'll have our preliminary budget to the board, which is a required meeting that we have to have with you. And then in July, on July 19th, the commissioner will have to certify the tax roll numbers and information, so we'll get our new required local effort number as well as our second calculation. On the 24th, I'll be providing to you the documents that we will be putting in the paper so that you will have it before it's put out into the paper. On the 26th, we will be advertising the budget in the news press, and then we'll have our tentative budget hearing with you on July 30th. And then on September 5th, we will have our final budget hearing with you. So that's what I have to update you on right now, and I'd like to turn it back over to Dr. Bernier.
I just would like to say a couple of quick things and thank Kelly and Amy, Dr. Desmore and Kelly Letcher for their hard work related to what they've been doing with school budgets. Our direct resource allocation, and I told you when I interviewed for this job that I was impressed that not only did your belief system say that students were most important, but you actually have district policy that says schools get funded first. It was really I've seen a lot of people say it. I've seen very few people actually do it. This tweak still allows schools to feed first, to be given their dollars. But now they're even being more specifically looking at weighted FTEs. So if I have 254, 255 funders, if I have children who need more money in order to be educated, the adjustment for those school buildings is being made at the budgetary level to ensure those dollars are flowing to the school, because those students do cost more money. There are school students with very specific needs that require paraprofessionals, additional physical equipment, and other things, and schools need to be in a position in order to be able to purchase those things. And they talked about ESE and making sure that they still stay in line with the requirements of the IEP. It's important to also mention ELL students. ELL students will also be an aspect of what they'll be expected to make sure that they fund and that they have the right levels of support. So as they're working on budgets and as budgets start to conclude and they finish, there'll be work amongst the executive directors as well as some of the individuals in ESE and in ELL to make sure that those budgets are appropriately done. Well, they have to balance. Kelly will ensure that they balance their budget, but there will be other eyes on the budget to ensure that the right types of programs and the right types of materials and supports are there in the budget to ensure that our children are getting the very best they can. And whether you recall it or not, back in the fall, you approved an FTE position specifically for the budget department, someone to begin to look over FTE. So it's really important, school principals know this, that it's really important that their FTE be accurate. So we've added a staff member to Dr. Desamore's team. We're calling him him or her, we're calling them the FTE czar. They're the person who, that when a principal gets a phone call from them, they're gonna go, uh-oh, this is gonna be about my FTE. Because the better we report, the better the information and the better the flow of dollars from the state. So the accuracy of that FTE reporting is going to be incredibly important going into the survey periods next year. And I just want to thank Dr. Desamore and Kelly for entertaining a crazy idea from a superintendent way back last spring, and then working this year with our principals to bring together what we think is an improved budgetary model, but we are calling it 1.0. So to borrow from Dr. Alton, from Dwayne, right, there'll be a 1.02, there'll be a 1.5, there'll be a 2.0. This will continue to grow and continue to be revised and tweaked as we work through budgetary cycles. So I want to thank them. Not only are they on top of the legislative appropriations, the number of students, what our numbers look like, but they've also been working very hard to bring additional customer service to our school buildings, and I want to thank you for that. So, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Board member questions, comments? Ms. Jordan?
Thank you very much for this. My question is, when it comes to, when the principals, so the principals are going to get these lump sums of funds. So when the art teachers, I was at Art Walk, so walking around and speaking to all the teachers and the people that were out there and, you know, hearing about, we have clay, but we have no kiln. We have a kiln, but we have no clay. And we have no paper to write on, so we're using this kind of paper. Where is that coming from when they're building their budget to make sure that the students are having what they, well, the teachers are having what they need to provide to the students in order to have their art classes or whatever we're offering them at their schools, whether it be art, music, whatever that looks like?
So budgets never go all the way in a first year, right? I was always trying to stay ahead, for instance, on my band. Sometimes they needed trombones, other times they needed sousaphones, other times, right? So you can never re-equip your entire band all at once. But kilns and clay and supplies have line items within the budgets where those principals can line item those things. And as a former principal, what I did with my staff is I knew there were certain subjects that were consumable. So I'll speak to the philosophy of what we're asking executive directors and our deputy superintendent to cover, and that is there are certain subjects that are consumable. Science taught the right way is always going to need more supplies the following year. PE taught the right way, so the kickball doesn't go over the fence every single time. They don't always need new equipment every year, but eventually you have to refresh your PE materials. Something like art, if you're teaching art the right way, at the end of the year, the paint, the paper, the clay are gone, right? So you have to consider that in your budgetary appropriations, but I'll let them explain where those lines are within the principal's budget.
So this, their materials and supplies for the first year is also going to be part of their dollar amount that they get. So that will be a decision that the principals make, along with how they want to staff their school, it's how they want to fund their school, and where the money is going to go. So that will be up to a principal's decision when they do it. And I'm sure that they will have those conversations with those teachers this year to find out what the needs are, and then, you know, kind of plan accordingly for next year.
And then if I may, because you mentioned the word consumable, that was a word that was said to me like multiple times, that there's only certain times that they could even ask for that in our district.
So in the past,
I'm asking.
Yeah, in the past, we provided a dollar amount per student for their consumables and things like that. We also provide, and we still will be providing on top of their, the other one is capital dollars, in case they need to replace that kiln, in case they need to replace that oboe or whatever, they'll have the funds to do that. But we have always provided a material and supply allocation to our schools. And that right now what we're doing is now that's in this number that they will then make their decision instead of us saying this is what you have. They'll make the decision on what they want to use for that purpose.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Is that it, Ms. Jordan?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Persons?
Since it's going to be the weighted FTE that's really going to drive all this, have the principals already sort of looked and saw whether their school's going to get more or less than maybe they did last year? I mean, I assume that there's, or have you all presented that figures to them? Okay.
So, yeah, we're still working on the exact figure, but one of the things and one of the reasons, as you know, usually the end of March is when we provide their allocations. We're providing at the end of April, or beginning of April, sorry, first week in April, because my staff is actually running the allocations the old way and the new way to make sure that there is no loss coming forward, that this really is better for our schools, and making sure that we do it. And then making some tweaks if we need to make sure that we cover all of the needs that they have.
Yep, that's really what I was going to ask next. Is there going to be a comparison of where they were last year and this year? Okay, thank you.
Ms. Langford Fleming?
Thank you again, and I think this was, every time I hear you, your message gets clearer and clearer, so thank you, because I know there's public out there that doesn't quite understand all these numbers and letters and what have you. So First of all, I know as a former teacher how important FTE is, but I think you'd be surprised as to how many teachers aren't really aware as to what that really means about students in their classroom during those windows of time. And I know that there used to be incentives in every teacher's classroom. If you make it to school for the next 10 days, there will be a pizza party at the end or something like that. So I know that those types of things take place. But I think if we explain it, and I'm sure principals have possibly in their after-school meetings with faculty meetings and such, and really break down what it means for students to be in school during obviously all the time, but specifically these 2 weeks, I think that would be helpful, especially to newer teachers, newer educators. Also, I love to see that principals were bold enough to ask for allocations. At one time, the last thing a principal wants to do at Christmas is have to go tell someone, I'm out of money and now we're not sure how to keep your position for the second semester or going into the next year. So I think that's great. And it's not just with materials, but it's also those positions that we've heard about already, the importance of like our MTSS and those types of faculty members. And then what I would like to suggest or recommend, if the public is tuning in today, with the loss of ESSER, with the student growth the way it is headed, with the extra funding to choose schools, I think now's a more important time than ever for us to start connecting with our business partners across the community, because there are so many people that are willing to give. I'll take your example, Ms. Torton, of the kiln. There are so many businesses willing to either donate funds or donate a kiln to schools, whether they adopt them or, I know we have a couple churches in our community that adopt a school, and I think the problem is they just don't know. And you don't know what you don't know. So if they haven't said, X school could really use, enough clay or a kiln to get through the rest of the year, I think there are businesses out there that are willing to partner with us. They don't know. So I just challenge the community to get more engaged, and for possibly the school district to reach out also. But that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Ms. Fleming, and you're right, because I already started raising funds for a kiln for a school, and the business community came in and go, what do you need? So yes, that is exactly right, because of the fact of how it was, they did not have the funds at the school. So I was just trying to figure out what does that look like from a teacher's perspective of how to get that. When they said they didn't have it, it's like, okay, fine, I need to figure out. So yes, thank you for that. I agree.
Okay. Anyone else before I go?
Thank you.
Ms. Patrica.
Thank you. Thank you very much. To piggyback on what Mrs. Langford Fleming said, you come up here and you break down very, very difficult information in digestible chunks, not just for the public, but for us here. Your job is a very difficult one, and 7 years, I think this is my 8th budget, maybe? I get it. My first year here, I had no clue what the heck was going on, but I get it. Speaking of getting it, let's go to slide 3, if we could. Thank you for what you did on slide 4. I think that what I was looking for, though, let's go to slide 4 instead.
Okay.
What I was looking for in slide 4 is how much of that BSA in 20, 21, 22, 23, 24 is actually our money, as compared to how much of that BSA goes toward required increases in the Florida retirement system. How much of it is, what's the word I'm looking for? The net. Right, what's the net? What of that money do we actually get to do what we want with? That's what I think I was looking for. And I heard you say that the 191.25 is a true increase. Does that mean that we really get to do whatever we want with that money? I didn't think so.
No, I mean, we still, that still has to cover the FRS increase, that still has the teacher's salary increase allocation attached to it. But it's a true increase in the fact that they didn't take other pieces, move them into that, and then say that was an increase.
So I think that's the number that's most helpful to me and to the public. What of that 191.25 do we actually get to use for our own initiatives? That's, I think, what I was looking for. So going back to slide 3, and in the spirit of what Ms. Morgan said earlier, which is I'm off this board, so I can pretty much say whatever I want. I look at, and that's not what you said, but that's how I'm saying. Looking at, what was it? The Family Empowerment Scholarships. Did y'all see that ECS is purchasing Hodges? And we get to see those tax dollar funded Family Empowerment Scholarships now going toward a private religious schools infrastructure, capital infrastructure. I don't think that's the best use of taxpayer dollars, but I'm not on the legislature, so I'll just leave my comment there. Finally, I want to gush like Dr. Bernier did, which is to thank you for the adjustments to the school allocations. I think that's wonderful. I think it's super hard after doing what you all have done for so long to make those adjustments and to get behind them, and I'm not hearing any sort of like, oh, you kind of had to do this. I'm hearing that you're in with both feet. I'm wondering what we're doing to train principals to better equip them to handle this newfound flexibility in a responsible way. And before you answer that, I'll make my last comment, which is principals are now on the hot seat, right? Like if we don't have Clay, it's because that money was used for something else. So principals are on the hot seat, which is a tough place to be. But if you could respond to the training, I'd appreciate that. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So thank you for that question. It's going to be a training and a learning process for us all. We are meeting today, tomorrow, and Thursday with principals at every level to kind of explain the concept here, the new allocation. And so they haven't heard all of this yet. And then following that, we'll have face-to-face meetings with them in labs where we're kind of, after they actually get their allocation, right? Where we're walking through it kind of in small groups or one-on-one with each to make sure that they're understanding everything that comes with it, what the changes are, everything they need to make sure they cover, because this is different from what they had seen before. And then we have worked through the process of formulating this whole new system with the executive directors as well. And so the executive directors also, fully understanding this concept because they've worked with us along the way, will also be the support for each of the principals at their levels to work with them, review their budgets, and make sure that everybody's meeting requirements, understanding what potential recommendations are, what ramifications are to decisions, and hopefully the end result of all that is, at the end of the day, students have what they need. We've budgeted to ensure that.
Yeah, and if I can piggyback on that, we have also, in the areas where we normally would have had, you must do this and you must do that, are areas such as ESC and ESOL. They are working on, by school, their recommended staffing in order to assure that the students' needs are being met. And they'll provide that to kind of help the principals with their decisions as well. So we've tried to make sure that the principals have all the information they need to make the decisions for their schools.
Thank you.
Anyone else before I go ahead? Okay. First off, thank you, Dr. Desamores and Ms. Leitcher, for your hard work. I appreciate your updates have been fantastic, and these presentations are great. We've kind of talked about this a little bit before, but as we're doing this and kind of doing the debrief and the preparation for our next budget, I know we just came out of legislative session, and it's a little bit later in the year next year, but I'd like to kind of see us, as we do this, kind of start to early focus on some of our legislative priorities so we can get kind of earlier on that, talking to some people beforehand, so we can really kind of continue to reemphasize some points. So that's something I don't know if we can look into among others. So, but that was my comments on that. So, okay, thank you, and ready to move on to item number 3. So, item number 3 will be the agenda review for tonight's meeting. So, Dr. Bernier, whenever you're ready. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had several questions come in related to the agenda coming up this evening. The first question came from the H part of the agenda, which is academic services. H.2, approval of the agreement with Dreamtime Entertainment. Could you please explain the purpose, the need, and what this will do for the district? Was this put out to bid? Please advise. If not, why? If so, please provide the bids. Do we not have the ability to do this in-house? And I see we're using ESSER 2 funds. Why not use those funds for employees? All excellent questions. I will do my best to summarize that this is a renewal of a contract that's been funded from ESSER 2 for 3 years, 22, 23, and 24. This is year 3 of the contracted service. The purpose of this contract is to create the wellness video lessons for grades 6 through 12 as required by Florida statute, the State Board of Education Rule 6A 1.094124, which is required instruction. Yes, we would say that the district lacks the workforce to create these videos. We certainly, Lori Brooks and her team certainly work with these individuals creatively to devise what, and with the Student Advisory Council as well, to devise what these video topics are, but then we use this outside company to develop the videos, professionally produce them so that they're ready to go for our for our closed circuit TVs and for our educators who work with Wellness Wednesdays. Section 101.04 parentheses 4 of Florida statute states that the School Board of Education may by rule provide the alternative procedures for bidding or purchasing in cases in which the character of the item requested renders competitive bidding impractical. Furthermore, the Florida Department of Education rule states the requirements for requesting competitive solicitations is hereby waived as authorized in section 1010.04 parentheses 4 for the purchase of professional or educational services, educational textbooks, printed instructional materials, computer software, films, reference books, and printed library cards, where such materials are purchased directly from the publisher or producer and the owner of the copyright. So as these individuals produce these videos, they do own them, or they are an exclusive agent within the state. In short, when it comes to specific services, the bidding process can be waived. And in this particular case, since it is a purchase service that does abide by the Florida statute and the Florida Department of Educational rule, we did not take these out to bid. Why are you using ESSER 2 funds? Why not use those funds? The ESSER 2 funds end, so this is a purchase for next year, and then the ESSER funding goes away. So this will not help us bridge the gap for our employees that are currently employed under ESSER funding because it's non-recurring money. So in July 1, this money will no longer be there. Any questions on H2? So the next one is on the ratification of the Memorandum of Understanding with the Southwest Florida Foundation, Inc., doing business as the Collaboratory. Can you please explain the program and how this MOU partnership with the Collaboratory will work and the plan? The MOU provides funding to the district from the Collaboratory to hire an assistant manager specifically to support our farm to school programs. The assistant manager for school gardens will provide guidance around the maintenance of the gardens, harvesting, distribution of food to additional schools and around the county, and support the overall success and sustainability of the school garden program. Which schools will benefit? The following schools are part of the farm to school program: Cape Coral High, Dunbar High, East Lee County High School, Harns Marsh Middle School, Heights Elementary School, Island Coast High School, Trafalgar Middle School, the Alva School, and the Young Parent Education Program.
Thank you. I'm actually very supportive of this. I just wanted people to kind of know about it in the community because some people don't know about our program, this gardening program, and it's actually a really wonderful program. It teaches the students a lot. It meets a lot of it's just a wonderful program, and I've witnessed it myself and been somewhat involved, and so has Ms. Jordan and others, and I like to see this grow, and I believe, my understanding is that this is going to be in opportunity for other schools to have this program, and that's why I was asking that.
What we did last year was we had a position that we could not find specifically the funding for. So we worked with the collaboratory this year to see whether we could find a different pathway for our alternative funding. Because in order to grow the program, we needed someone to really have oversight. These are really amazing people who work on this program, not only the educators at the school, but the people who reside here at district office, and they have many other feet in other fires. I mean, they have other responsibilities than just this program, and the assistant manager is an opportunity to coordinate that work and then specifically look to how we can expand, but expand in a sustainable way. If we're not careful, this would have gotten too big too fast, and I think we could have lost some of the quality, and that's what this individual is going to be primarily responsible for.
And I think it's just wonderful that the collaboratory is partnering with us to do this. That's the other thing, because the money's coming from the collaboratory, and I think that's really important for the community to know that they're, partnering with us on that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We had two questions, Mr. Persons and Ms. Morgan.
Do we have a vehicle for this person to use? There's going to be a lot of travel involved in transporting different materials to the different schools, and I know that's been a little bit of an issue.
I don't have a specific answer to that question, sir. That has not come to my attention, but we certainly have available White Fleet, and we can make sure that this person, if they need a White Fleet vehicle, can use it during regular business hours.
This is an observation. If we want to bring something to the attention of the public, I think the appropriate place to do it is after the agenda meeting. I don't think anybody's watching a workshop to see us explain for their purposes what it is we're doing. I think that belongs as a board member comment following the agenda. That's my observation. Thank you.
That is your opinion, Ms. Morgan, and I respect and appreciate that, but a lot of people don't know much about it, and if we don't talk about it and tell our story at some point in time, I don't know when we do it, and I don't think we do it enough. So I'll continue to do what I do, and you continue to do what you do.
Okay, we're ready to move on to the next one.
This item comes also from the consent agenda, but from a new topic area of operations. L1 is the approval of the RFQ for Phase 2B, total cost estimate for Veterans Park Academy and the arts renovation, Lemuel Teal School, and the shared campus black box theater facility updates, Lemuel Teal re-roof, and HVAC upgrades. Can you please separate out the cost of the black box theater facility and the Lemuel Teal re-roof and the HVAC upgrades? I'd like to see specifically the cost for the theater. And then how do the specs compare to the black box theater built at Bonita Springs High School, recognizing that the labor material costs have increased significantly since the Bonita Schools High School's construction. So let me begin with the first part. The cost of the black box is located on pages 43 and 44 of the guaranteed maximum price document attached to the board agenda. The total construction cost for the black box theater is $12,352,909.09. This includes all associated insurances and costs associated with this portion of the project. In Phase 2B, total project cost sheets attached to the agenda as well. The details of all items, attached to the agenda details all the items that are part of the $55,469,956, which includes the work at Lemuel Teal roof, windows, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, and the Veteran Performing Arts Academy campus roofing, electrical, plumbing, and flooring. They are working on pulling out specifically those project numbers by those categories. I do not have them at this time. In addition, the material and labor costs, in addition to the material and labor costs increase which are mentioned about the previous black box theater built, the original one at Bonita Springs High School, the design has been updated for this one for code and for arts program needs. A cost comparison is extremely difficult with the Bonita Springs black box theater as it was not broken out and built as a separate entity. And the other thing that I know Mr. Rickenbacker would want me to add is that the Bonita Springs Black Box Theater was built as an entire project with the rest of the high school. So for instance, we didn't have to order separate concrete, separate materials. It all came with certain costs associated by buying, if you will, in bulk when we built the entire school. I did ask Mr. Rickenbacker before coming to the meeting today if he could try to get us a ballpark figure estimate, and as soon as I can get that, I will share it. So that was followed up by another board member who asked some of the similar questions. What are the itemized costs for each school to date? How much was spent in the past 4 years on Lemuel Teal, AKA the Veterans Park? And what part of this estimate is the black box? So Lemuel Teal used to be the former Lehigh Acres Middle School. So the Lemuel Teal, AKA Veterans Park, I think what we're asking for is the itemized cost, which I had provided earlier in terms of what was being spent on each one of the buildings. But the total project sheet attached to the agenda item, the total amount spent to date on this project of both improving Veterans Park and working with Lemuel Teal has been $19,717,706. The total construction cost for the Black Box Theater, which was always part of this project, but we're finally getting to the very end of it, is the $12,352,909.09, which I mentioned earlier.
Any follow-up on that, Ms. Morgan?
Yeah, my only concern is that I'm concerned about adding a lot of frills to black boxes and other things as we go up, and that really was the reason for the question. So you've answered it. I realize.
I will get Mr. Rickenbacker back with you specifically. I want to tell you that one of the reasons why it's down as low as it is because the construction company that it was assigned the Lemuel Teal project really value engineered this, and they went back and they looked at the original Bonita Springs High School plans, and they saw some additional things that were in the ad for this Black Box Theater that it would be nice to have, but they really worked the budget in order to find cost savings on behalf of the school district, and that's why the cost for the theater is the $12 million versus I think originally it was significantly higher than that. So we can work with what was proposed and give you that number as well.
Thank you. You've answered my question. No more information is required. Appreciate that.
Mr. Persons?
Just for clarification, this black box will be for 2 schools sharing, just so the public knows that.
It is a joint use project from Veterans Park, Academy of the Arts, and Lemuel Teal. They both have access, and they will need to coordinate that work, and we'll help them create a schedule.
Please proceed.
L2 was the approval of Phase 2B total project cost for the estimate of Riverdale High School renovation. The question is lengthy. This project has become a rebuild, not necessarily, and this is the question. This project has become a rebuild, not a renovation as originally approved by the board in 2022, and it essentially tripling the original proposed project and cost. Not yet having the RSM report determining the elements contributing to the project's escalation and associated explosion in cost, please comment about projected changes to construction policy and processes designed to prevent such a significant miscalculation, even misrepresentation of facilities needs and priorities. This project, in addition to the absence of the timely attention to Bonita Elementary, suggests that there may have been or is a significant problem with the planning that must be addressed. I shared this before, and I think I know if I don't get it right, the board member will certainly ask me to re-clarify. But the question is, how did we get here, and what have we done in the meantime in order to fix it? So the construction department now sees Riverdale High School renovation project as an example of the importance of the change the board made. The board, following other construction projects which became estimates that became larger bills, moved into what's called a Phase 1 and Phase 2 construction process. This is where we break project phases apart into multiple phases to true the total project cost to ensure that they will be known. But those are not known until the last phase, which is brought before the board for approval. So if you know, all of our approvals for additional building have always gone through a phase 1 process. We put people out, we examine the facility, we look at the land, we look at the project, we look at the plans, and we come up with how far do the utilities have to come in from. You know, we do all of that planning. That creates a guaranteed maximum price. The guaranteed maximum price, which is part of the phase 2, then comes for your final approval. And I can assure you'll have Mr. Rockenbacher during the briefing. I'm sure he will be happy to provide information as to the fact he has not exceeded those gross maximum prices. There are a number, but he always works to stay below that number, and that's why he's consistently reminding you of the money that he and his team, by working with our contractors, returns back to the district so it can build additional buildings. This has been used efficiently on the phase 1 and phase 2 process for the construction of Gateway High School, the new Lehigh Acres Middle, as well as Lemuel Teal. It has also worked for Amana Serra. The practice of following these internal processes and not deviating to expedite timelines will prevent this from occurring in the future. Second question, same issue on Riverdale. I understand it's an interior renovation, but this renovation has increased quite a bit. Did we use the steel that was purchased for the innovation building as previously advised? Yes, the structural steel inventory was used, so the inventory that we had from Quadruple A has been utilized. Not every piece of steel from Quadruple A was utilized, but the cost savings for the Riverdale Science Building by using the steel saved the district $108,500. Any remaining steel still can be used in future builds and future projects, and it is also continued to be slated for, as ROTC towers have to be replaced, to remove the wooden pilings which rot over time and potentially use steel to support those ROTC, and we will continue to track the use of that steel through its completion and making sure that we realize as much cost savings in our projects by utilizing the materials we already have on board.
Questions, comments? Ms. Morgan?
Now, I understand phase 1 and phase 2, but in fact, the projections brought to the board over time changed significantly, and there is a problem in how that rebuild, or whatever you want to call it, was brought to the board. And that's all I'm asking, is an acknowledgement that we will have processes and policy in place to prevent that kind of problem going forward. That's my bottom line. And I know you're working on it. I just felt the need to call attention to it. Thank you.
Any other questions on this item or any other items on the agenda board? Ms. Jordan?
Well, I apologize only because of the fact that I was having issues with my computer. But I do have questions regarding the G1 and 2, the MOUs with the Boys and Girls Club and the YMCA. And I was just curious on, and you don't have to share whenever, what determines the cost that they're paying us? And I know, for instance, the Stars Complex will be utilizing Fort Myers Middle, supposedly, but I did not see a MOU for them. So is everybody required an MOU? And what determines the price that they're paying us, because of the fact that we do have costs involved in those? It's for the summer schools. And I know that we provide lunch for the Boys and Girls Club. The YMCA provides lunch for their students. And again, I apologize.
I don't have all that specific information. I will get it to you as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
Is that it, Ms. Jordan?
Nope, yes, thank
Okay.
you.
Ms. Langford Fleming?
Yes, and I apologize too for not sending this, so if you can't answer right now, then that is fine, but discussion about H4 on the agenda for this evening, the approval to adopt the annual instruction materials for K through 12 social studies. A couple of weeks ago, we had a constituent come to the podium. I've also had conversation since then with other members of the community. I think it's important that if the superintendent could either address this now or later when the time is appropriate today, to explain what the short list really is, because I know we touched on that, and that's where we drew the textbook from, and also if we could also have an explanation on the steps that someone would take, either a parent or a student or even an educator, if they happen to see something in the textbook that is questionable, because the only thing that hasn't been brought to my attention was what did the text actually say to spark that there was CRT in the textbook. It was just a conversation, but no evidence was brought to our attention. So I just wanted to know if you could explain to the public, how would a teacher, a student, or even a parent go through the steps of questioning a document, and what would be, how would we follow up with that?
I would advise you, from the position of being a former high school, middle school principal, what the first step for any parent would be. And that would be to make an appointment with their building level principal, go in and meet with any material that they might feel is objectionable to them, and have a rational and direct conversation regarding what they specifically object to. It would be then incumbent upon that principal to contact their executive director and then members of our appropriate subject area experts, and then we could work from there to either try to revise or to resolve, I guess would be the better word, resolve any conflict, or to help explain what is in a textbook and what isn't. Over spring break, I had the great opportunity to, prior to spring break, had an opportunity to review many of the history textbooks that are on the short list. They are on a cart in the board office now, if you would like to peruse through them. These are the state. So the state starts with a very large list, and then they narrow, 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 narrow. We did the same thing. As they narrowed, we narrowed, and then we worked with our curriculum resource adoption teams to choose these in social studies. Social studies is always a difficult adoption. So is language arts now, and so is science, because everyone has very different but very important opinions as to what's contained in those books. I think we have to rely on the resource of state government and the Department of Education specifically, to help identify the materials that they believe meet the requirement. We recently received communication from our Commissioner of Education related to services and tutoring services, asking us to be cognizant and aware of connections of certain tutoring services to nations beyond the United States. The Department of Ed is being extremely diligent in making sure that curriculum materials are aligned to the state's expectation. I've reviewed them. I will not say I've read every page of every textbook. I have not. But there wasn't enough specific example in the constituent. But there is an opportunity still, if someone objects, we could find additional materials. I don't know if our attorney Dupuy Bruno would want to weigh in on that issue.
I completely agree with Dr. Bernier. The first step is always to reach out to the school and have that conversation and see if there's any accommodations that can be made. In addition, as Dr. Bernier indicated, staff was extremely careful this year to make sure that we waited and got the textbooks that were already approved by the state. If all of that fails and the constituent or the parent is still not satisfied, we do address it in Board Policy 2522, which actually has a very specific process on how to petition the school board for a review of that adoption of that particular textbook.
Well, I am very disappointed you did not spend your spring break reading the entire book. We'll have to discuss that later. But no, I appreciate it. And I did know that I'm also very appreciative that we have waited till, we could just filter that out. And I also want to thank all of the community members that serve on our curriculum adoption, because that is incredibly time consuming, and they do that as volunteers. Yep, that's all. Thanks.
Teachers too.
Yes, teachers.
A lot of our educators give up a lot of extra time to review those materials.
That's right. Thank you.
Okay. Any other agenda comments or questions before we move on to go to the order? Ms. Patrica?
I'm not sure, Mrs. Langford Fleming, whether those are comments, do you want the superintendent to make those comments tonight before we approve? Like at the end of public comment and before we approve? Because we're likely going to have more people who are concerned about that tonight.
Thank you for that suggestion, Ms. Patrica. Dr. Bernier, if you would touch on that this evening, I think that would be helpful for the public, just in case people aren't able to listen in on this workshop today.
Yes, ma'am.
Edit? Okay, we're going to move on to good of the order board comment. We'll start with Ms. Juvenelli.
I don't have a lot. I'm trying to remember what I did in the last couple weeks. It's all a blur. But I do want to read an email that we all may have received this, and I just think it's important when we were talking about funding and so forth. And this just came from a teacher that wanted to thank us for coming to Art Walk. And I'm just going to read her letter because I think it's important. First, I would want to say thank you for coming to the Art Walk on Friday and for stopping to talk to me. I do feel like you were listening, and it's very appreciated. Please remember that I am not the only art teacher in this situation. There are also music teachers who are in need of instruments. There are intervention support specialists who are in danger of completely losing their positions due to funding. This is terrifying, not only for intervention specialists, but for every single classroom teacher who is already buried in work and can't handle one more task. Every teacher in the district is struggling to make ends meet at home. Many are working 2 jobs, sharing cars, and having roommates trying to just survive. We do not feel appreciated. We feel stressed and tired and scared. We are trying our best to be there for our students. We are trying our best to make schools a happy, safe place for all. But this is getting more and more difficult to do. I was able to raise $280 on Friday night. My total raise so far is $1,097. I will be selling items again in our spring fling on Friday and have another fundraiser currently in the works, and I am waiting to hear from the grant people. The total for the kiln is $4,500 before tax, shipping, and installation. The school's PTO said they would give me half of the money and I would make the rest. Anything that you could do would be appreciated, and so much, and thank you for listening. And then she asked one question: can a teacher go and put a GoFundMe on Facebook for their kiln? So I mean, this is just a little bit of what's going on in our community, and our teachers and our staff, and the overworked and underpaid. So, I mean, and the dedication is huge, and I want people to know, teachers and staff to know that we know how hard you're working, and we do appreciate you. Thank you. I didn't have my mic on. Story of my life.
Ms. Patrica.
I don't have anything for good of the order. I will give my board member report at the briefing.
Okay. Ms. Jordan?
I do not have anything at this moment, but I would like to know that answer if they can or cannot have a GoFundMe page.
Right.
That was a good question. Thank you.
Mr. Persons?
Nothing at this time.
Ms. Langford Fleming?
I do not have anything at this time. Thank you.
Ms. Morgan?
Nor do I.
I have none, so Attorney Dupree Bruno, do we have any comment from you?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Dr. Brenner?
Nothing, sir.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. At this point, we'll have a board briefing today at 2:30, followed by a board action meeting at 6 o'clock tonight. At this point, having no other business to come before this body and seeing no objection, this meeting is adjourned, and the time is 2:12 p.m.